The whipping winter winds of Colorado Territory cut through Garrett O'Malley's weathered duster like a knife as he urged his exhausted mare through the snow-covered pass. February 1874 had brought the worst blizzard in years to these parts, and any sane man would have holed up days ago. But Garrett wasn't heading for shelter, he was running from memories. The snowfall had slackened enough that he could see a dozen yards ahead when something dark disrupted the endless white of the valley floor. His mare snorted nervously, steam billowing from her nostrils as Garrett reined her in, squinting against the glare. A body lay half buried in a snowdrift, motionless. "Whoa, girl," he murmured, dismounting with a wince. His bad leg always ached worse in the cold, a souvenir from Gettysburg that reminded him daily of what he'd lost. Approach cautiously, his instincts warned. In these mountains, a man couldn't be too careful. But as he drew closer, the figure's delicate shape became apparent. A woman, dressed in clothes far too thin for this weather, her face ashen beneath a dusting of snow. For one grim moment, he thought she was already dead. Then he spotted the faintest cloud of breath escaping blue-tinged lips. Kneeling beside her, Garrett brushed snow from her face. She couldn't be older than 25, with dark lashes resting against pale cheeks. A nasty gash crossed her forehead, dried blood frozen in her chestnut hair. "Miss, can you hear me?" Garrett asked, gently patting her cheek. No response. He checked quickly for other injuries, finding what looked like a gunshot wound in her side, the blood frozen around the torn fabric. Whoever had done this had left her for dead, and not long ago, judging by the tracks partially filled with fresh snow. Garrett glanced at the darkening sky. The nearest settlement was Kingfisher, a good 20 miles south. The woman wouldn't survive the night out here, and his own cabin was even further. "Hang on, miss," he said, though she couldn't hear him. "I'm getting you out of here." With practiced movements, Garrett wrapped her in his spare blanket before lifting her onto his horse. She was lighter than he expected, frighteningly so. After securing her to the saddle, he took the reins and began walking. 20 miles in this weather would be brutal, especially on foot, but he'd endured worse. The woman didn't have the luxury of time. "Come on, Penny," he urged his horse. "Long night ahead." The mare huffed but followed obediently as Garrett set a grueling pace, the woman's life hanging in the balance with every step. As night fell completely, the temperature plummeted further. Garrett kept moving through the darkness, one hand on Penny's reins, the other occasionally checking the woman's pulse. Each time he felt the weak flutter beneath his fingertips, determination surged through him anew. His legs screamed with pain, but he pushed onward. The woman stirred once, delirious with fever. Her eyes fluttered open, striking green even in the moonlight, but unfocused. "Thomas," she whispered hoarsely. "Rest easy," Garrett replied. "You're safe now." Her eyes closed again before she could say more. Hours passed in painful monotony. The wind died down, leaving an eerie stillness broken only by the crunch of snow beneath Garrett's boots and Penny's hooves. His thoughts drifted to the circumstances that might have left this woman alone and wounded in the wilderness. Bandits, perhaps, or a stage robbery gone wrong. The lawless expanse between settlements made easy pickings for desperate men. When dawn finally broke, Garrett's muscles burned with exhaustion. He'd walked through the night without stopping, pausing only briefly to check the woman's condition and adjust her position on the saddle. His beard was crusted with ice from his breath, and his fingers had lost all feeling hours ago. But ahead, through the morning mist, lay Kingfisher. The small settlement appeared deserted in the early hour, smoke rising from only a few chimneys. Garrett headed straight for the doctor's house at the edge of town, nearly stumbling with fatigue as he reached the front porch. His fist pounded on the door. Doc Matthews. Need help. The door swung open to reveal a disheveled man in his 50s, gray hair standing on end. Garrett O'Malley. What in blazes found her half frozen in the snow near Thunder Pass? Garrett interrupted, already moving back to Penny. Gunshot wound. Been walking all night. The doctor snapped to attention, calling for his wife. Martha, prepare the surgery table. Together, they carried the unconscious woman inside. While Doc Matthews cut away her frozen clothing, his wife bustled about with hot water and bandages. Garrett stood awkwardly in the doorway, suddenly aware of the impropriety of remaining. "You should get some rest, son," Martha Matthews said kindly. "You look half dead yourself." Garrett shook his head. "Need to know if she'll make it first." "That'll be hours yet," the doctor replied without looking up from his work. "Bullet went clean through her side, but infection's setting in. The cold may have slowed the bleeding, but she's got a nasty fever. And these bruises, someone roughed her up good before shooting her." "Any idea who she is?" Martha asked, helping her husband clean the wound. "None," Garrett admitted. "No bag, no identification. Called someone Thomas when she briefly came to." Doc Matthews grunted. "Well, whoever she is, she owes you her life, Garrett. 20 miles in that weather. Most men wouldn't have bothered." Garrett turned away, uncomfortable with the praise. "The silver dollar still serving breakfast." "Should be. Tell Eliza I said your meal's on my tab." With a nod, Garrett left the doctor's house, leading Penny to the livery before heading to the town's only restaurant. The warmth inside the silver dollar hit him like a physical force, thawing his frozen extremities painfully. Several early risers looked up as he entered, raising eyebrows at his haggard appearance. "Lord above, Garrett O'Malley," Eliza Jones exclaimed from behind the counter. "You look like you wrestled with death himself and barely got away." "Feel like it too," he admitted, sinking onto a stool. "Coffee, please, and whatever's hot." As Eliza poured his coffee, curiosity got the better of her. "Heard you brought some half-dead woman to Doc's place. Where'd you find her?" News traveled fast in Kingfisher. By the time Garrett finished his breakfast, half the town knew about the mysterious woman he'd rescued. Sheriff Ben Taylor even stopped by, notebook in hand. "Any idea what happened to her?" the lawman asked, after Garrett recounted finding her. "Looked like she was running from something," Garrett replied. "There were tracks, partly covered by fresh snow. More than one person, I'd wager." The sheriff made a note. "We've had reports of the Blackwell gang operating in these parts. Stagecoach robbery 2 days ago left 3 dead. One passenger unaccounted for, a woman." "Could be her," Garrett acknowledged. "Though what she was doing up in the pass I couldn't say. I'll telegraph the stage company, see if they can provide a description." The sheriff stood. "You staying in town?" Garrett hadn't thought that far ahead. His cabin 25 miles north suddenly seemed very empty. "For now. Want to make sure she pulls through." "Commendable," the sheriff said with a nod. "Though unusual for a man who usually avoids people like they carry the plague." Garrett offered no response to that, just drained his coffee cup. After securing a room at the boarding house, Garrett returned to Doc Matthews' place that afternoon. The doctor looked tired but satisfied. "She's stable," he reported. "Fever's still high, but the bullet wound is clean. No major organs hit, thank the Lord. She's young and seems healthy otherwise. With proper care, she'll recover." "She say anything?" Garrett asked. "Nothing coherent. Keeps muttering about someone named Thomas and something about papers." The doctor studied Garrett curiously. "You can see her if you'd like, though I'm surprised you're still interested. Not like you to get involved in other folks' troubles." Garrett ignored the observation. "Just want to know she'll be all right." The woman lay on a small bed in the doctor's spare room, her face flushed with fever. Someone, presumably Martha, had cleaned the blood from her hair and dressed her in a nightgown. She looked different now, less like a corpse and more like a sleeping angel, despite the bruising on her face. Garrett stood awkwardly by the door, hat in hand, unsure why he'd come. He didn't know this woman. Once she recovered, their paths would likely never cross again. Yet something about finding her alone in that vast whiteness had struck a chord within him, a reflection, perhaps, of his own isolation. He was about to leave when her eyes fluttered open, those same striking green eyes he'd glimpsed in the moonlight. "Water," she whispered. Garrett moved quickly, pouring from the pitcher on the nightstand. He helped her drink, supporting her head with one calloused hand. "Thank you," she managed after a few sips, her voice raspy. "Where am I, Kingfisher?" "Doc Matthews' house." Confusion clouded her features. "How did I get here?" "I found you in the snow near Thunder Pass, brought you in." Recognition dawned in her eyes. "You're the man from last night." "I thought I dreamed you." She tried to sit up but winced, pressing a hand to her bandaged side. "Easy now," Garrett cautioned. "You've been shot." "I remember." Her expression darkened. "They took everything." "Who did?" Before she could answer, her eyes slipped closed again, exhaustion reclaiming her. Garrett stood there a moment longer before quietly exiting the room. In the front parlor, Doc Matthews looked up from his ledger. "She woke briefly," Garrett reported. "Remembered being attacked." "Said they took everything." The doctor nodded. "Sheriff's waiting on word about that missing passenger. Meanwhile, she needs rest." "When do you think she'll be well enough to talk more?" "Tomorrow, perhaps, though she'll need weeks to fully recover." The doctor gave him a pointed look. "She'll need somewhere to stay, assuming she has no family nearby." Garrett recognized the implied question but pretended not to. "Town council can figure that out. I'm heading back to my cabin once I know she's out of danger." The lie tasted bitter on his tongue. He had no intentions of leaving until he knew more about what had happened to her. After 5 years of deliberate solitude, Garrett couldn't explain the strange protectiveness he felt toward this stranger. Perhaps saving her life had created an unwanted bond. Or perhaps something about her vulnerability had awakened something long dormant within him. Either way, as Garrett walked back to the boarding house through the afternoon sunlight reflecting blindingly off the snow, he knew his orderly existence had been irrevocably disrupted. The next morning, Garrett returned to find the woman sitting up in bed, color returned to her cheeks. Martha Matthews had helped her wash and brush her hair, which now fell in chestnut waves past her shoulders. She looked up as he entered, a small smile touching her lips. "My rescuer returns," she said. "Mrs. Matthews told me what you did carrying me 20 miles through the snow. I owe you my life, Mr. O'Malley," he supplied. "Garrett O'Malley, and it was no hardship, miss." "Madeline," she replied. "Madeline Turner." Martha, who had been adjusting Madeline's pillows, excused herself with a knowing smile that made Garrett uncomfortable. "The sheriff would like to speak with you when you're feeling up to it," he said, remaining by the door. "There was a stagecoach robbery 2 days ago. He thinks you might have been a passenger." Madeline's fingers twisted in the bedsheet. "Yes, I was traveling from Denver to Boulder. We were attacked just after sunrise, 5 men in masks. They shot the driver and guard immediately." She swallowed hard. "The other passengers tried to fight back." They killed everyone." "But not you," Garrett observed quietly. "They thought I was dead. I played dead after being shot and they didn't check closely." Her voice shook slightly. "But then one of them recognized me from a photograph, said I might be useful after all. They took me with them up into the mountains." Garrett's jaw tightened. "Did they?" "No," she answered quickly, understanding his unspoken question. "Though they might have eventually. They were too busy arguing over the contents of my trunk." When they made camp that night, I managed to escape while they were drinking. I ran blindly through the snow until I couldn't go any further. You're fortunate I happened by, Garrett said. Not many travel that pass in winter. Madeline studied him with those penetrating green eyes. Why were you there? It was a simple question, but one Garrett wasn't prepared to answer truthfully. Heading back to my cabin, I trap in the winter months. She seemed to sense his evasion but didn't press. The doctor says you've checked on me several times since bringing me here. Garrett shifted uncomfortably. Wanted to make sure you pulled through. Would be a waste of a 20-mile walk otherwise. Her smile suggested she didn't believe his gruff dismissal, but she changed the subject. Sheriff Taylor was here earlier. He asked about my belongings. They were important papers documents that prove ownership of a mining claim near Boulder. My late husband's legacy. The mention of a husband shouldn't have disappointed Garrett, but somehow it did. Your husband was a miner. Thomas was an assayer who saved enough to purchase his own claim. We were married just 2 years when consumption took him last fall. Sadness flickered across her face. The claim papers were being held by his solicitor in Denver until certain conditions of his will were met. I was transporting them to file in Boulder when the attack happened. And now the thieves have them, Garrett concluded. Yes, Sheriff Taylor says without those papers I have no legal claim to the mine, all of Thomas's hard work gone. Her composure cracked slightly. I have nothing left, no money, no home, not even a change of clothes. The town will help, Garrett assured her. Folks here look after those in need. Perhaps, she said doubtfully. Though I can't impose on the doctor's hospitality indefinitely. Before Garrett could respond, Doc Matthews entered the room. Good morning, Mr. O'Malley. I see you've been getting acquainted with our patient. Just leaving, Doc, Garrett said, grabbing his hat. To Madeline, he added awkwardly, glad to see you're improving, Mrs. Turner. Madeline, please, she corrected. And thank you again, Mr. O'Malley, for everything. Garrett nodded and retreated, unsettled by the warmth her gratitude stirred in him. Outside, he nearly collided with Sheriff Taylor on the porch. Just the man I wanted to see, the lawman said. Got confirmation from the stage company passenger named Madeline Turner was indeed on that coach. Widow of Thomas Turner traveling with legal documents. She told me as much, Garrett replied. Any leads on the gang? That's what I wanted to discuss. I've got 2 deputies, both green as spring grass. I could use an experienced man to help track these outlaws. Garrett stiffened. I don't wear a badge anymore, Ben. Don't need a badge to help recover a widow's stolen property, the sheriff countered. Just your tracking skills and steady aim. Word is you were the best scout in the 3rd Colorado Cavalry. That was a lifetime ago. The woman lost everything, Garrett. You went to extraordinary lengths to save her life. Why not help finish what you started? Garrett glanced back at the doctor's house, thinking of Madeline's dignified courage despite her circumstances. He'd walked away from violence and other people's problems years ago, preferring the solitude of his mountain cabin and the simple challenges of survival. But the sheriff's words struck home. What good was saving her life if he left her destitute? The tracks will be covered by now, he said finally. Maybe not completely. That pass is sheltered from the worst winds. Besides, men like that leave other traces. They'll be selling their stolen goods, drinking, talking. Someone will have seen something. Garrett sighed, knowing he'd already decided. I'll need supplies. And information about what they took besides Mrs. Turner's papers. Sheriff Taylor smiled, clearly having expected this response. Meet me at my office in an hour. I've got a list of the stolen items from the stage company. As the lawman walked away, Garrett wondered what he'd just committed to. He'd spent 5 years avoiding entanglements, nursing old wounds both physical and spiritual. Now, in the span of 2 days, He'd rescued a beautiful widow and agreed to hunt down dangerous outlaws, all for a woman he barely knew. Yet the image of Madeline lying half dead in that snowdrift haunted him. Whatever troubles he'd invited by saving her, he couldn't bring himself to regret it. An hour later, Garrett entered the sheriff's office to find Taylor reviewing a telegraph message. "Got some news," the sheriff said without preamble. "Bartender over in Hayes Junction says 3 men matching our outlaws' descriptions were there yesterday, flashing money and bragging about a big score. They mentioned heading to Silverton next." "Silverton's a 3-day ride," Garrett noted, studying the map on the wall. "If we leave now, we might catch them before they move on." "That's what I'm thinking. My deputies can handle things here." Taylor hesitated. "There's something else, Mrs." Turner described the leader of the gang, tall man with a distinctive scar down his right cheek. Garrett's blood ran cold. "Ray Blackwell. You know him. We crossed paths after the war. He was rustling cattle up near Fort Collins." Garrett's voice hardened. "He doesn't leave witnesses." "Which makes Mrs. Turner's escape all the more remarkable," Taylor observed. "And dangerous. If Blackwell realizes she survived, he'll come looking to finish the job," Garrett concluded grimly. "Exactly. I've arranged for her to stay with the widow Johnson while she recovers. Best not to advertise her whereabouts." Garrett nodded approval. "When do we leave?" "First light tomorrow. Need time to gather supplies and let the passes clear a bit. Last thing we need is to get caught in another snowstorm." As Garrett turned to leave, the sheriff added, "One more thing, O'Malley. Don't tell Mrs. Turner about Blackwell. No sense causing her more distress." Garrett agreed, though he suspected Madeline Turner was stronger than either of them gave her credit for. That evening, Garrett visited Madeline once more, finding her sitting in a chair by the window, wrapped in a borrowed shawl. The setting sun cast a golden glow over her features, highlighting the determined set of her jaw despite her obvious weakness. "Sheriff Taylor tells me you're riding out tomorrow to look for the men who robbed the coach," she said without preamble. "News travels fast in Kingfisher." "Is it true?" Garrett nodded. "Got a lead on their whereabouts. With luck, we'll recover your papers." "I want to come with you," she declared, meeting his startled gaze steadily. "Absolutely not. You've been shot, Mrs. Turner. You need rest." "Madeline," she corrected automatically. "And I need my claim papers more than rest. That mine is all I have left of Thomas and my only means of supporting myself." "It's too dangerous," Garrett insisted. "These men are killers." "I'm well aware," she retorted. "I watched them murder 5 people in cold blood. I still see their faces when I close my eyes." Garrett softened his tone. "All the more reason to stay here where it's safe. The sheriff and I will handle this. And if you find them, how will you know which papers are mine among everything they stole?" She leaned forward intently. "The claim documents have specific markings, details only I would recognize. You could describe them. It's not that simple. There are surveyor's maps with handwritten notations, legal documents with specific language." She shook her head. "No, I need to be there." Garrett studied her determined expression. "Doc Matthews says you won't be fit to travel for at least a week." "Dr. Matthews is overly cautious. The bullet wound is clean and my fever has broken." She straightened in her chair, wincing slightly but hiding it quickly. "I've endured worse than this, Mr. O'Malley." "Garrett," he found himself saying. "If you're insisting on Madeline, then I'm Garrett." A small victory smile touched her lips. "Well, Garrett, it seems we have an impasse." He sighed, recognizing the stubborn glint in her eyes. It reminded him of his younger sister, who would have been about Madeline's age now if the typhoid hadn't taken her. "Sheriff Taylor won't agree to this," he warned. "Then we won't tell him my intentions until we're ready to depart." She raised her chin. I can ride, and I'll not slow you down. 20 miles in snow nearly killed you 2 days ago, he reminded her. And yet here I sit, thanks to you. Her expression softened. I understand your concern, truly, but this is my fight too. Those men took more than papers, they took my future, my security. I need to see this through. Garrett recognized the need for closure in her voice. Hadn't he once felt that same burning determination to confront the architects of his own losses? But his pursuit of justice had only led to more pain, more emptiness. I'll speak with the doctor, he conceded finally. If and only if he says you're strong enough to travel in a few days, I'll consider it. But you'll follow my lead, no arguments. Relief and triumph flashed across her face. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Doc Matthews is likely to shoot me for even suggesting it. Contrary to Garrett's expectations, Dr. Matthews was grudgingly supportive of Madeline's determination to travel, though he insisted on a minimum 3-day delay to allow her wound to begin healing properly. That young woman has a spirit stronger than most men I've doctored, he told Garrett privately. Keeping her confined against her will would do more damage than letting her go, but you watch her closely for fever or bleeding, you hear. Sheriff Taylor was less accommodating when Garrett broached the subject the next morning as they prepared to depart. Absolutely not, the lawman declared. It's bad enough I'm dragging you into this mess. I won't be responsible for a wounded widow, too. She's not asking for your responsibility, Garrett countered. And we need her to identify those papers, unless you're planning to bring back every document those outlaws stole. We could be riding into a gunfight. We'll keep her safe, Garrett promised. Besides, she's not leaving for 3 days. We can scout ahead, make sure it's secure before she joins us. The sheriff studied him skeptically. You seem mighty concerned about what this woman wants, O'Malley. Known her, what? 2 days, Garrett stiffened. I respect her right to recover what's hers. Uh-huh. Taylor looked unconvinced. Fine. We'll ride ahead to Silverton, confirm Blackwell's gang is there. And that's a mighty big if we think it's safe enough, we can send for her. But she stays with Deputy Wilson until then. Garrett agreed to the compromise, relieved to have won at least that concession. When he returned to inform Madeline, she was sitting on the edge of her bed, attempting to dress herself in a borrowed outfit several sizes too large. Sheriff says we go first, he reported. You follow with his deputy in 3 days if the situation allows. Disappointment flickered across her face. And if it doesn't, then you stay put until we return with your papers. He hesitated. It's the best arrangement I could negotiate, Madeline, she sighed but nodded. Very well. 3 days, but promise you won't confront them without me. We'll just locate them, nothing more, he assured her, though he had no intention of letting Blackwell anywhere near her again. As Garrett turned to leave, Madeline called after him. Be careful, Garrett. These men, they enjoy killing. I saw it in their eyes. I know they're kind, he replied grimly. Rest easy, we'll be back for you. The journey to Silverton was grueling. Though the weather had improved, the mountain passes remained treacherous with ice and snow. Garrett and Sheriff Taylor rode hard, stopping only when necessary for the horses' sake. They spoke little, each man lost in his own thoughts. On the afternoon of the second day, as they crested a ridge overlooking Silverton's scattered buildings, the sheriff broached the subject that had clearly been on his mind. You were a different man before the war, he observed. Remember when you first came to Colorado Territory? Couldn't have been more than 20, full of big dreams about ranching. That was a lifetime ago, Garrett replied tersely. Then the war came and you joined up, came back changed like most did. But you took it harder than most, isolating yourself up in those mountains, barely speaking to another soul for months at a time. You have a point, Ben. Just wondering what made you decide to help Mrs. Turner. You could have left her in that snow, or dropped her at my office and disappeared back to your cabin. Yet here you are, hunting outlaws for a woman you barely know." Garrett had asked himself the same question repeatedly over the past days. He had no ready answer except the truth something about Madeline's vulnerable strength had pierced the shell he'd built around himself. "Some things you just do because they need doing," he said finally. Taylor nodded, accepting the non-answer. "Well, whatever your reasons, it's good to see you among the living again." They made camp that night within sight of Silverton but far enough away to avoid detection. The next morning, they rode into town separately, Taylor openly as a lawman making inquiries, Garrett more discreetly as a prospector looking for work. By midday, they had confirmation. Blackwell and his gang were indeed in Silverton, staying at the Double Eagle Saloon on the town's south end. According to the bartender who spoke to Taylor, they'd been flashing money and talking about heading to Mexico once the passes cleared further. "They still have the documents," Taylor reported when they reconvened outside town. "Overheard them arguing about the mining claim. Seems it might be more valuable than they initially thought. They're trying to figure out how to claim it themselves. They'd need Madeline's signature for that," Garrett noted, "or proof of her death. Which explains why Blackwell's been asking if anyone's seen a woman matching her description." Taylor's expression was grim. "He knows she escaped, and he wants to find her." "All the more reason to keep her away from here," Garrett said. "Agreed, but we have another problem. There are 5 of them, all armed to the teeth. Even with Deputy Wilson, that's 3 against 5, not odds I like." Garrett considered this. "We don't need to confront them all at once. We just need to get those papers." "What are you suggesting?" "That we observe their routine. Find out where they keep the documents when they're most vulnerable, then strike surgically." Taylor nodded slowly. "That could work, but it means staying here longer than planned. Mrs. Turner is expecting us back tomorrow." "Send Wilson with a message explaining the delay," Garrett suggested. "She'll understand the necessity." But as they continued surveillance over the next 2 days, Garrett found himself increasingly troubled by thoughts of Madeline making the journey to Silverton despite their warnings. Her determination was formidable, and he suspected she wouldn't remain in Kingfisher indefinitely if they failed to return as promised. His concerns proved prophetic when, on the morning of the 5th day, he spotted a familiar figure riding into town alongside Deputy Wilson. Even from a distance, he recognized Madeline's straight-backed posture and chestnut hair, now partially concealed under a borrowed hat. "Damnation," he muttered, abandoning his observation post to intercept them before they could reach the town center where Blackwell might spot her. He caught up with them at the edge of town, his expression thunderous as he pulled alongside. "What part of wait for our signal was unclear?" he demanded. Madeline met his glare steadily. "You were overdue. Deputy Wilson received no communication explaining the delay." "We sent a message," Garrett insisted, glancing accusingly at the young deputy. Wilson shrugged apologetically. "Never reached us, Mr. O'Malley. We waited the agreed 3 days plus 1 for good measure. And then I insisted we come," Madeline added. "I was concerned something had happened to you." The genuine worry in her voice tempered Garrett's anger somewhat. "We're fine, just being cautious. Blackwell and his men are here, heavily armed and dangerous." "Then we should proceed carefully," she said reasonably. "Is there somewhere secure where I can wait while you explain the situation?" Her calm practicality diffused his frustration further. "There's a small inn on the north side of town. The proprietor is discreet. We can talk there." Once settled in the inn's private dining room, Sheriff Taylor detailed their findings: Blackwell's presence, the confirmation that he still possessed the stolen documents, and his apparent knowledge that Madeline had survived. "He's been asking about you," Taylor concluded, "describing you to barkeeps and storekeepers around town." Madeline paled slightly but remained composed. "Then he knows I can identify him." "It's more than that," Garrett said. "The mining claim is apparently quite valuable. They've been discussing how to claim it for themselves." "Impossible without my signature," she said. "The claim is in my name as Thomas's widow, which makes you both an obstacle and a potential asset to them," Taylor pointed out. "Either way, it's not safe for you to be seen in town." "I understand." Madeline straightened her shoulders. "But now that I'm here, perhaps we can use this to our advantage." "What do you mean?" Garrett asked warily. "I mean, Blackwell wants me. Why not let him think he's found me?" "Absolutely not," Garrett said immediately. "Hear me out," she persisted. "I'm not suggesting I actually meet with them. But if word reaches them that a woman matching my description is in town, they might move the documents, perhaps even separate them from other stolen goods for easier access." Taylor rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "Could make them easier to retrieve. Or could get you killed," Garrett countered. "These aren't men to be trifled with." "I'm aware of the risks," Madeline said quietly. "I watch them murder innocent people without hesitation, but I can't hide forever, and I need those papers." Garrett studied her determined face, recognizing the steel beneath her outward fragility. In the days since he'd found her in the snow, she'd shown remarkable resilience and courage. He admired her spirit, even as it terrified him. "If, and I mean if we consider this," he said finally, "it would be under strict conditions. You don't leave this inn without an escort. You don't make direct contact with anyone associated with Blackwell. You follow orders without question." "Agreed," she said promptly. Sheriff Taylor looked between them, a knowing expression crossing his face. "We'll need to plan this carefully. Wilson, ride back to the observation point and continue watching the saloon. Note any changes in routine. O'Malley, secure rooms here for tonight. I'll casually mention at the general store that I spotted a woman matching Mrs. Turner's description asking about stagecoach schedules." As the sheriff and deputy departed, Madeline turned to Garrett. "Thank you for considering my suggestion." "Don't thank me yet," he replied gruffly. "This is still a dangerous gambit." "Life is dangerous, Garrett," she smiled faintly. "A lesson I've learned too well lately." He wanted to say more to express the inexplicable protectiveness he felt toward her, to make her understand the risk she was taking. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, he nodded stiffly and went to arrange their lodging. That evening, over a simple meal in the inn's dining room, Madeline asked the question Garrett had been dreading. "Why were you really in Thunder Pass that day?" she inquired softly. "You said you were returning to your cabin, but that pass isn't on the way to anywhere from Kingfisher." Garrett stared into his coffee cup, debating how much to reveal. Something about Madeline invited confidence, despite his habitual reticence. "February 15th is a difficult day for me," he said finally. 5 years ago, on that date, I lost someone important. I ride out every year just to be alone with the memories." "I'm sorry," Madeline said, genuine empathy in her voice. "Was it family, my wife?" Garrett answered, the words feeling strange on his tongue. He so rarely spoke of Sarah. "And our unborn child, complications with the pregnancy." There was nothing anyone could do. Madeline reached across the table, placing her hand gently over his. "That's why you live alone in the mountains." It wasn't a question, but he nodded anyway. "After the war, Sarah was my reason for living. When she died, there didn't seem much point in being around people anymore." "I understand," she said softly. "When Thomas died, I wanted to disappear too, but he made me promise to live truly live, not just exist." "Sounds like a wise man." "He was," she smiled sadly. "The mine was his dream." Making it successful would honor his memory, give purpose to his shortened life. They sat in companionable silence for a moment, two people united by loss, yet somehow finding comfort in shared understanding. Garrett was surprised by how natural it felt to talk with her, how the weight he'd carried for years seemed slightly lighter in her presence. The moment was broken by Sheriff Taylor's return. His expression was grim as he joined them at the table. "Word's out," he reported. "And Blackwell's men are already responding. One of them was asking questions at the stables just now whether anyone had seen a woman arriving alone." "Good," Madeline said. "Let them look for me." "Not so good," Taylor countered. "They're splitting up to search the town." "Increases the chance of one of them spotting you for real." "Or it creates an opportunity," Garrett suggested, an idea forming. "If they're separated looking for Madeline, their lodgings might be less guarded." Taylor caught on immediately. "A diversion. Keep them searching while one of us retrieves the documents." "I'll need to know exactly what I'm looking for," Garrett said, turning to Madeline. "Describe the papers in detail." As she outlined the specific characteristics of the claim documents, the red wax seal, the distinctive handwriting of Thomas's solicitor, the attached surveyor's maps with blue ink annotations, Garrett committed every detail to memory. By the time they finalized their plan, it was well past midnight. "Get some rest," Taylor advised them both. "Tomorrow will test us all." But sleep proved elusive for Garrett. He paced his small room, mind racing with all the ways their plan could go wrong. The thought of Madeline in danger made his chest tight with an unfamiliar anxiety. When had this woman's welfare become so important to him? Dawn brought clear skies and a sense of foreboding. According to Deputy Wilson's reports, 2 of Blackwell's men had departed early, presumably to continue their search for Madeline. The remaining 3, including Blackwell himself, remained at the saloon. "Perfect," Taylor said as they reviewed the information over breakfast. "Wilson and I will create a distraction at the north end of town. Report of a woman matching Mrs. Turner's description attempting to hire a private coach. Should draw at least one more of them away." "While I search their rooms," Garrett confirmed. "And I remain here, safely out of sight," Madeline added, though her tone suggested she'd prefer a more active role. Garrett fixed her with a stern look. "Promise me you won't leave this in under any circumstances." "I promise," she replied solemnly. "I have no desire to face those men again." With the plan set, they prepared to execute it. Taylor and Wilson departed first, positioning themselves strategically for the diversion. Garrett waited 20 minutes before making his way toward the Double Eagle Saloon, moving with the casual confidence of a man with legitimate business. The saloon was quiet in the morning hours, with only a few early drinkers nursing their cups. Garrett ordered whiskey he had no intention of drinking, studying the room's layout while eavesdropping on nearby conversations. Blackwell's mighty interested in finding that woman, one patron was saying to another. Offering $50 to anyone who spots her. Must be carrying something mighty valuable, his companion replied. Though word is she's recovering from a gunshot wound. Can't have gone far. Garrett tensed at this information but maintained his neutral expression. After a suitable interval, he approached the bartender with a carefully rehearsed story about looking for work as a guard for a mining operation. "Heard some fellows here might be hiring," he said casually. "Group staying upstairs, prospectors, I was told." The bartender snorted. "Those ain't prospectors, mister. Best steer clear unless you're looking for trouble." "Appreciate the warning," Garrett replied, leaving a generous tip. "Mind if I use your outhouse?" Once outside, Garrett circled to the rear of the building where an external staircase provided access to the upper floor. He waited until he heard commotion from the town's north end. Taylor's diversion underway, before swiftly ascending. The upper hallway was deserted. 4 doors lined the corridor, and Garrett had no way of knowing which might house Blackwell or the stolen documents. He'd have to search them all, quickly and quietly. The first room was empty of occupants but clearly in use, clothes strewn about, empty bottles on the floor. Garrett searched methodically, checking under the mattress, in saddlebags, anywhere papers might be stored. Nothing. The second room yielded similar results. As Garrett approached the third door, he heard voices from the stairwell. Someone was coming up. He ducked into the partially searched room, leaving the door cracked just enough to observe. Ray Blackwell himself appeared in the hallway, accompanied by one of his men. Blackwell looked older than Garrett remembered, his face more lined, the scar on his cheek more pronounced. But his eyes were the same, cold and calculating. "Waste of time," Blackwell was saying. "If she's in town, she's hiding good." "Maybe she already left," his companion suggested. "No, she needs those claim papers. Worth a fortune. That mine assay shows high-grade silver throughout." Blackwell unlocked the third door, the one Garrett hadn't yet searched. "She'll surface eventually, and when she does—" The threat hung unfinished as they entered the room, closing the door behind them. Garrett silently cursed his bad timing. Now he knew which room likely contained the documents, but it was currently occupied by the very men he hoped to avoid. He needed a new strategy. Returning to the first room, he located a half-empty bottle of whiskey. With a swift motion, he hurled it through the window, creating a loud crash in the alley below. Then he flattened himself against the wall beside the door. As expected, the commotion brought immediate response. Blackwell's door flew open, and footsteps pounded down the hall. "What the hell was that?" Blackwell demanded. "Someone in the alley," his companion replied. "Could be trouble." "Check it out," Blackwell ordered. "I'll secure our property." Garrett tensed as Blackwell returned briefly to his room while the other man descended the stairs. Moments later, Blackwell emerged again, now armed with a rifle in addition to his sidearm, and followed his man downstairs. This was Garrett's chance. He slipped into Blackwell's room and began a rapid but thorough search. The place was surprisingly orderly compared to the others, making his task both easier and more difficult. Fewer hiding places, but items more likely to be missed if disturbed. Under the bed, he found a lockbox. Locked, naturally. Garrett drew his knife and worked the simple mechanism open with practiced ease, a skill acquired during the war that he rarely acknowledged. Inside, he found cash, jewelry, and a packet of papers bound with twine. The papers matched Madeline's description exactly: red wax seal still intact, blue annotations on the attached maps. Garrett quickly confirmed the name. Turner appeared on the primary document before securing the packet inside his coat. He closed the lockbox, returning it to its position under the bed, then moved to the window to plan his exit. The alley below was empty, but voices from around the corner suggested Blackwell's men were still investigating the disturbance. The window opened onto a narrow ledge that connected to the adjacent building's roof. Not an ideal escape route, but better than facing Blackwell on the stairs. Garrett was halfway out the window when the door burst open behind him. Blackwell stood in the doorway, eyes widening with recognition and rage. "O'Malley," he snarled, reaching for his gun. Garrett didn't hesitate. He launched himself fully onto the ledge as Blackwell's first shot splintered the window frame. Scrambling across the narrow space, he pulled himself onto the neighboring roof, just as a second bullet whistled past his ear. From this higher vantage, he could see the commotion below. Blackwell's men converging on the building, Sheriff Taylor and Deputy Wilson running toward the gunshots from the north end of town. A perfect storm of chaos. Garrett moved quickly across the rooftops, putting distance between himself and Blackwell, before finding a rear access ladder that allowed him to descend into a quiet side street. From there, he circled wide around the developing confrontation, making his way back to the inn through alleys and service passages. Madeline was pacing anxiously when he entered their private dining room, her face lighting with relief at his appearance. "I heard gunshots," she said. "Are you hurt?" "Not a scratch," he assured her, though his bad leg ached fiercely from the exertion. He reached inside his coat and produced the packet of papers. "Are these what you're looking for?" Her eyes widened as she took the documents with trembling hands. "Yes, these are Thomas's claim papers." She looked up at him with shining eyes. "How did you manage it?" "Wasn't easy," he admitted, dropping into a chair. "Blackwell recognized me. He knows I have the papers." "Then we need to leave immediately," she concluded, already gathering her few belongings. "Not without Taylor and Wilson," Garrett countered. "They were heading toward the commotion when I left." "We can't wait," Madeline insisted. "If Blackwell knows you took the papers, this is the first place he'll look." She was right, of course. Garrett peered out the window, assessing the situation. The sounds of altercation had grown louder, suggesting the confrontation had escalated. "Back door," he decided. "We'll circle around to the stables, get our horses. With luck, we can meet the sheriff on the outskirts of town." They moved quickly through the inn's kitchen, ignoring the cook's startled protests, and into the rear service yard. From there, they navigated the narrow spaces between buildings toward the livery stable. They were halfway there when a voice called out behind them. "That's far enough, O'Malley." Garrett pushed Madeline behind him as he turned to face Blackwell. The outlaw stood 20 paces away, revolver leveled steadily at Garrett's chest. "Hand over the woman and the papers," Blackwell demanded. "Maybe I'll let you live." "We both know that's not true, Ray," Garrett replied evenly, keeping his body between Blackwell and Madeline. "Worth a try." Blackwell smirked. "I recognized you the minute I saw you. Thought you died in that mountain cabin of yours years ago. Shame you didn't." "Why did you attack the stagecoach?" Garrett asked, stalling while he assessed their options. The alley offered little cover and Blackwell was too far away to rush. "Wasn't planning to," Blackwell admitted. "Regular robbery, that's all. But then I saw her name on the passenger manifest. Turner. Same as on those mining documents we found in another passenger's luggage. Pure luck." Behind him, Madeline gasped softly. "You murdered those people for papers you didn't even know existed beforehand." "Business opportunity, madam." Blackwell's cold eyes shifted to her. "Nothing personal." "Well, not until you escaped. That made it personal." Garrett felt Madeline straighten behind him. "Those papers are legally mine," she declared. "My husband died for that claim." "And now you'll join him," Blackwell replied, raising his gun. "Unless you sign them over to me first." "Might let you live if you cooperate." "Like you let the stage passengers live," she challenged, her voice remarkably steady. Garrett used their exchange to subtly shift his weight, preparing to draw. He was fast, but at this distance, Blackwell had the advantage. It would come down to who was more accurate under pressure. "Enough talk," Blackwell snapped. "The papers, now, they're not here," Garrett lied. "Already sent them to the sheriff's office with a deputy." Blackwell's expression darkened. "You're lying." "Am I?" "Why would I keep them when I know you're after them?" The momentary doubt in Blackwell's eyes was all the opening Garrett needed. In one fluid motion, he drew and fired. Blackwell returned fire simultaneously, but his bullet went wide as Garrett struck him in the shoulder, spinning him halfway around. "Run!" Garrett shouted to Madeline, pushing her toward a side passage. They fled as Blackwell's curses echoed behind them, followed by more gunshots that splintered the wooden siding near their heads. Garrett returned fire blindly as they ran. more to keep Blackwell pinned down than with any hope of hitting him. The livery stable appeared ahead, its wide doors standing open. They sprinted inside, startling the stable hand who was brushing down a mare. "Our horses," Garrett gasped. "Quickly!" The young man responded to the urgency in his voice, hurrying to bring their mounts from the stalls. As he worked, Garrett peered cautiously outside, seeing no immediate pursuit but knowing it wouldn't be far behind. "Can you ride?" he asked Madeline, suddenly remembering her wound. "I'll manage," she replied grimly, though her face had paled with the exertion. Their horses were saddled in record time, Garrett pressing extra coins into the stable hand's palm, with instructions to delay anyone who asked after them. Then they were riding hard out of town, taking the south road before cutting east toward a mountain trail Garrett knew would be difficult to follow. They rode for hours, pushing the horses as much as they dared through the snow-covered terrain. Garrett kept a vigilant eye on Madeline, noting how she grew progressively more rigid in the saddle, clearly in pain but refusing to complain. When they finally stopped to rest the horses by a small stream, she nearly fell dismounting. Garrett caught her, alarmed by the warmth radiating from her skin. "You're burning up," he said, helping her sit against a fallen log. "It's nothing," she insisted, though she couldn't suppress a wince as she settled. Garrett gently opened her coat, finding fresh blood staining her borrowed shirt. "Your wound has reopened. We need to tend to it." "There's no time," she protested. "Blackwell is injured and at least 2 hours behind us," Garrett completed firmly. "We have time to make sure you don't bleed to death after all this." With reluctant acquiescence, she allowed him to examine the wound. The bullet hole had indeed reopened, though not severely. Garrett cleaned it with snow-cooled water from the stream and rebandaged it with supplies from his saddlebag. "Thank you," Madeline said quietly when he finished. "Not just for this, for everything. You've risked your life repeatedly for a stranger." Garrett busied himself repacking the medical supplies, uncomfortable with her gratitude. "You're not exactly a stranger anymore," she smiled faintly. "No, I suppose not." Her expression grew serious. "But I still don't understand why. You've spent years avoiding entanglements with others, by your own admission. Why help me?" It was a question Garrett had asked himself repeatedly since finding her in that snowdrift. The answer had evolved with each passing day, from simple human decency to something far more complicated, something he wasn't sure he was ready to acknowledge even to himself. "Sometimes life puts people in your path for a reason," he said finally, surprising himself with the sentiment. "Maybe finding you was the reason I was in that pass on that particular day." Madeline studied his face, her green eyes seeming to see more than he intended to reveal. "I believe there's purpose in such meetings," she agreed softly. "Thomas used to say there are no accidents, only opportunities we don't yet understand." Before Garrett could respond, distant hoofbeats reached their ears. He tensed, hand moving to his revolver as he scanned the trail behind them. "Mount up," he said tersely. "Quietly." They rode deeper into the forest, following game trails that would be difficult to track. The hoofbeats eventually faded, but Garrett maintained their cautious pace, taking every precaution to conceal their trail. By nightfall, they reached a small hunter's cabin Garrett had used occasionally during trapping expeditions. It was rudimentary, one room with a stone fireplace, a rough-hewn table, and a single bed frame with a straw mattress, but it offered shelter and relative security. "We'll rest here tonight," he decided, helping Madeline dismount. "It's well hidden and I know the approaches. If anyone comes, we'll hear them long before they reach us." Inside, he quickly built a fire while Madeline sank gratefully onto the bed, her exhaustion evident in every line of her body. Once the cabin had warmed, Garrett checked her wound again, relieved to find no fresh bleeding. "Your fever's down," he noted. "Rest will help." "What about Sheriff Taylor and Deputy Wilson?" she asked, concern in her voice. "Taylor's a capable lawman. My guess is they're either pursuing Blackwell or headed back to Kingfisher with his men in custody." Garrett arranged his bedroll near the door. "We'll connect with them once we're sure it's safe." As night deepened around the cabin, a comfortable silence settled between them. Madeline had managed to eat a little of the jerky and hardtack Garrett offered, and now sat propped against the wall, examining her reclaimed documents by firelight. "It's all here," she said with evident relief. "Everything Thomas worked for, everything he left for our future." "What will you do now?" Garrett asked. "With the mine, I mean." She considered the question thoughtfully. "Hire good men to work it, learn the business myself. Thomas believed it could produce for years with proper management." Her fingers traced the drawings on the survey map. "It was to be our legacy, our security. Now it will be my new beginning, in Boulder." "Yes, that's where the claim is registered, where Thomas had established connections." She looked up at him. "What about you? Will you return to your cabin?" The question gave Garrett pause. Throughout their journey, he'd avoided thinking beyond the immediate goal of recovering Madeline's papers and ensuring her safety. His solitary existence had been a given, an unquestioned constant for 5 years. Yet now, contemplating return to that isolation felt strangely hollow. "I haven't decided," he answered honestly. Madeline held his gaze. "There's a world beyond grief, you know. It took me nearly a year after Thomas died to understand that. Honoring their memory doesn't mean stopping your own life." "Is that what I've been doing? Stopping my life, haven't you?" she asked gently. Garrett stared into the fire, unable to deny the truth in her words. He had been existing, not living. Surviving, but nothing more. The past days with Madeline had awakened something he'd thought long dead: purpose, connection, even hope. "Get some rest," he said finally, unwilling to pursue the uncomfortable self-examination. "We have a long ride tomorrow." Morning brought clear skies and an unspoken agreement to continue their journey to Kingfisher rather than wait for potential pursuit that might never materialize. Madeline's strength had returned somewhat with rest, and the return journey seemed less daunting in daylight. They rode steadily through the day, stopping occasionally to rest the horses and check Madeline's wound, which showed signs of proper healing. By late afternoon, they crested a familiar ridge that offered views of Kingfisher in the distance. "Almost home," Garrett commented, then immediately regretted the word choice. Kingfisher wasn't home to either of them, merely a waypoint in their separate journeys. "Such as it is," Madeline replied with a small smile, "though I suppose home is where you make it." As they approached the town's outskirts, they were met by a rider coming fast in their direction, Deputy Wilson, looking relieved at the sight of them. "Mr. O'Malley, Mrs. Turner." "Sheriff's been worried sick," he exclaimed as he reined in beside them. "When you disappeared from Silverton, we feared the worst." "We had to leave in a hurry," Garrett explained. "Blackwell recognized me after I took the papers." Wilson nodded eagerly. "Sheriff Taylor cornered him and one of his men in the saloon afterward. Nasty shootout, but we got them. Blackwell's wounded but alive, locked up in Silverton's jail until he's well enough to transport." "And his other men?" Madeline asked. "2 captured, 1 killed resisting arrest, 1 still at large," Wilson reported. "But the sheriff says the danger's past. Blackwell was the brains and the meanest of the bunch." Relief washed over Garrett. With Blackwell in custody, Madeline would be safe to proceed with her plans. The thought brought an unexpected pang. Their shared adventure was reaching its natural conclusion. In Kingfisher, they were welcomed with excitement and curiosity. The story of Madeline's rescue, the recovery of her stolen property, and Blackwell's capture had already become local legend, embellished with each telling. Doc Matthews immediately insisted on examining Madeline's wound, pronouncing it healing nicely despite foolish exertions. That evening, a small celebration was held at the Silver Dollar in their honor. Sheriff Taylor, who had returned from Silverton just hours after them, recounted the capture of Blackwell with suitable dramatic flair. Garrett, uncomfortable with the attention, retreated to a quiet corner while Madeline graciously accepted the town's well wishes. "You're quite the hero," Martha Matthews observed, settling beside him with a cup of coffee, "though you don't seem to enjoy the recognition." "I'm no hero," Garrett replied. "Just did what needed doing." Martha studied him shrewdly. "She's quite remarkable, that young woman, strong in spirit despite everything she's endured." Garrett nodded, watching as Madeline laughed at something the sheriff said. She seemed transformed from the half-dead woman he'd found in the snow, vibrant, determined, full of life despite her losses. In that moment, he realized how much he admired her resilience, her courage in facing an uncertain future alone. "She's leaving tomorrow," Martha continued casually. "Stagecoach to Boulder, now that the roads are clearing. Sheriff's arranged an armed escort, given what happened last time." The information shouldn't have surprised Garrett, yet it struck him like a physical blow. Of course she was leaving. She had a mind to manage, a new life to build in Boulder, not Kingfisher, and certainly not in a remote cabin with a broken man who'd spent years hiding from life. "Good," he managed. "She'll be safer with an escort." Martha gave him a knowing look. "Sometimes the safest path isn't the right one, Garrett O'Malley. Something to consider." Before he could respond to this cryptic remark, she patted his arm and returned to the celebration, leaving Garrett alone with uncomfortable thoughts. Later that night, unable to sleep in his rented room at the boarding house, Garrett found himself walking through the quiet streets of Kingfisher. His feet carried him inevitably to Doc Matthews' house, where Madeline was spending her final night in town. He stood outside, staring up at the window he knew to be hers, a soft light still glowing within. What was he doing here? What could he possibly say that would matter? As he turned to leave, the front door opened and Madeline herself appeared on the porch, wrapped in a borrowed shawl. "I saw you from the window," she explained. "Couldn't sleep either." Garrett shook his head. "Too much thinking." "About?" she prompted, descending the steps to join him in the yard. "The future," he admitted. "Yours, mine. Mine is relatively straightforward," she said. "Boulder, the mine, building something meaningful from what Thomas left behind." She paused. "Yours is less certain, I think." "My cabin's waiting," Garrett said, though the words felt hollow even to his own ears. "Trapping season's not over yet." Madeline studied his face in the moonlight. "Is that really what you want? To return to solitude after everything that's happened?" The question hung between them, demanding honesty Garrett wasn't sure he was capable of giving. How could he explain the fear that gripped him, fear of caring again, of risking loss, of emerging from the protective shell of isolation? "I don't know what I want," he confessed finally. "I think perhaps you do," she said softly. "But wanting means risking disappointment. Hoping means risking pain. It's easier not to want or hope at all." Her insight pierced him deeply. "You sound like you understand that feeling. After Thomas died, I considered retreating from the world entirely. Selling the claim, using the money to secure a quiet, safe existence somewhere remote." She smiled faintly. "But that would have betrayed everything he lived for, everything we planned together." "Your situation was different," Garrett argued. "You had a purpose, a direction." "Purpose can be found, Garrett, or created." Madeline took a step closer. In the past days, you've shown more purpose than many men show in a lifetime. You saved me, protected me, helped me recover what was rightfully mine. Those actions came naturally to you, despite years of chosen isolation. Garrett found himself unable to look away from her earnest gaze. What are you saying, Madeline? I'm saying perhaps there's a reason our paths crossed. Perhaps finding me in that snow wasn't just chance. She took a deep breath. I'm saying I don't want to say goodbye tomorrow. The admission hung in the cold night air between them, unexpected yet somehow inevitable. Garrett felt something long dormant stirring within his chest, hope, terrifying and exhilarating. Boulder's a long way from here, he said, his voice rougher than intended. Yes, she agreed. And mines need security, protection from men like Blackwell who might try to take what isn't theirs. Are you offering me a job, Mrs. Turner? Garrett asked, a smile tugging at his lips despite his effort to remain serious. I'm offering you a purpose, she corrected. At least to start. What it might become. She let the sentence trail off, her meaning clear in her eyes. Garrett reached out slowly, giving her time to step back if she wished, and took her hand in his. It felt right there, small but strong, a perfect fit. I'll need to settle things at my cabin, he said. Pack up what matters, make arrangements for the rest. Joy bloomed across her face. You'll come to Boulder? I'll come to Boulder, he confirmed. Not for a job, Madeline, for a chance, for whatever might be possible between us given time. She stepped closer, closing the distance between them until he could feel the warmth of her breath in the cold night air. I'd like that, Garrett O'Malley. When he lowered his head to kiss her, it felt like coming home after a long, lonely journey. Her lips were soft beneath his, her response tender yet certain. In that moment, Garrett knew with absolute clarity that the path forward, however uncertain, was one they would travel together. Spring came early to Boulder in 1874. By March, the snow had receded from the lower elevations, revealing tender green shoots pushing through the damp earth. From the porch of their newly constructed cabin overlooking the Turner mine, Garrett and Madeline watched as workers came and went, the operation growing more organized and profitable with each passing week. Thomas would be proud, Madeline observed, leaning against the porch railing. 3 new veins discovered already, and the assayer says the silver content is among the highest he's seen. You've done well, Garrett replied, coming to stand beside her. Not many widows would have taken on a mining operation single-handedly. She smiled up at him. Not single-handedly. I've had considerable help. It was true. In the 2 months since they'd arrived in Boulder, Garrett had proven invaluable hiring trustworthy men, establishing security protocols, negotiating fair contracts with the smelting company in town. His natural leadership and practical experience commanded respect among the miners, while his unwavering support gave Madeline confidence in her own decision-making. Their personal relationship had developed more gradually, both aware of the shadows of their pasts and the need for proper appearances. Garrett maintained separate lodgings in town initially, though he spent most days at the mine site. Only after Madeline had established herself as a respected businesswoman did they begin building the cabin on the ridge, a practical location for overseeing operations. They explained to curious townspeople. If anyone suspected deeper feelings between the mine owner and her security manager, they kept such thoughts private. Boulder was a progressive community by frontier standards, more concerned with commerce than gossip. Letter came for you today, Garrett mentioned, pulling an envelope from his pocket. Sheriff Taylor's handwriting. Madeline opened it eagerly. They had corresponded regularly with Kingfisher since their departure, keeping informed of Blackwell's prosecution and other local matters. He says Blackwell's been sentenced, she reported after scanning the contents. 20 years hard labor. His remaining men received lesser sentences, but none will trouble us again. She looked up with satisfaction. Justice served finally. Good news, Garrett agreed, though he knew the memories of that stagecoach attack would never fully fade for Madeline. Some wounds healed but left permanent scars, a reality they both understood intimately. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the activity below as the day shift ended and miners began their trek home to town, or to the bunkhouses recently constructed near the main shaft. "I've been thinking," Madeline said eventually, a hint of nervousness in her voice. "About the future." "What about it?" Garrett asked, noting her sudden seriousness. "The mine is established now, profitable beyond what even Thomas anticipated. We have good men running the day-to-day operations." She turned to face him fully. "I find myself wondering what comes next." Garrett studied her face, the face that had become dearer to him than he'd ever thought possible again. In the past months, they had built something precious together, a partnership based on mutual respect, shared purpose, and deepening affection. Yet they had carefully avoided defining what lay beyond that partnership, both perhaps fearing to disrupt the delicate balance they'd achieved. "What are you suggesting?" he asked carefully. "That perhaps it's time to acknowledge what we mean to each other," she replied, meeting his gaze steadily. "That perhaps it's time to stop living in the shadows of what we've lost and embrace what we've found." Garrett's heart quickened at her words. "Madeline, I love you, Garrett O'Malley," she said simply. "I think I began falling in love with you when you carried me 20 miles through the snow without stopping. I've grown more certain of that love with each passing day." The declaration, so straightforward and honest, was quintessentially Madeline. No games, no pretense, just truth, offered openly, regardless of risk. "I've been afraid," Garrett admitted, taking her hands in his. "Afraid that loving you would somehow dishonor Sarah's memory. Afraid that allowing myself to care so deeply again would inevitably lead to more pain." "I know," she said softly. "I've felt the same about Thomas, but I've come to believe that loving again doesn't diminish what we had before. It honors, it proves that they taught us how to love, how to open our hearts despite knowing the risks." Garrett reached up to touch her cheek, marveling at how this remarkable woman had broken through defenses he'd thought impenetrable. "I do love you, Madeline Turner, more than I thought possible." Her smile was radiant. "Then perhaps we should do something about that." 2 weeks later, they were married in Boulder's small church, with Sheriff Taylor and Doc and Martha Matthews making the journey from Kingfisher to stand witness. The ceremony was simple but joyful, a celebration not just of their union but of the second chance at happiness neither had expected to find. As summer turned to fall and fall to winter, the Turner mine continued to prosper under their joint management. The cabin on the ridge became a true home, filled with books, comfortable furnishings, and eventually the sound of children's laughter. Their first child, a son they named James Thomas O'Malley, was born the following spring, a strong, healthy boy with Madeline's green eyes and Garrett's determined chin. 2 years later, they welcomed a daughter, Sarah Elizabeth, whose arrival healed the last lingering wounds in Garrett's heart. Over time, they expanded their business interests beyond the original mine, investing in other properties and commercial ventures in the growing town of Boulder. Their reputation for fair dealing and community involvement made them respected figures in Colorado Territory's development. On cold winter evenings, when snow blanketed the ridges much as it had on that fateful February day, they would often sit before the fire, children asleep in their beds, and marvel at the unlikely path that had brought them together. "You ever think about how close we came to never meeting?" Madeline asked on one such night, her head resting against Garrett's shoulder. If you hadn't chosen to ride through thunder past that particular day, or if you hadn't escaped Blackwell's gang, Garrett added, his arm tightening around her. If any single moment had played out differently. Yet here we are, she concluded, looking up at him with the same love that had sustained them through the years. Perhaps Thomas and Sarah somehow knew guided us to each other when we needed it most. Garrett smiled at the thought. I'd like to believe that. I do believe it, Madeline said with certainty. Too many coincidences, too many precise moments that had to align perfectly. As the fire crackled and snow fell gently outside their window, Garrett reflected on the journey that had brought him from isolated grief to this abundant life. From a man who chose solitude to a husband, father, and community leader. From a broken soul to one healed by love's patient persistence. Thank you, he said softly, pressing a kiss to Madeline's temple. For what? She asked, though her smile suggested she already knew. For being worth carrying 20 miles through the snow, he answered. And for carrying me even further since then. Outside, the Colorado winter raged on, much as it had that day in 1874 when he'd found a half-dead woman in a snowdrift. But within their home on the ridge, built on second chances and unexpected love, there was only warmth and light, and the promise of tomorrows stretching endlessly before them.